Hello everybody! Today we are going to be talking about frogs, and wow, it has been a while since we have spoken about frogs or just amphibians in general on this channel. So for those of you who are familiar with me and my channel, you guys probably know that I have kept and cared for dozens of different species of animal before, and for those of you who are not familiar with me or my channel, I have kept and cared for dozens of different species before. Now, most of the animals that I've cared for and that I've worked with have been reptiles. As you guys probably know, you can kind of see around me, lots of enclosures over here, you know, you can kind of take a look around even more. Yeah, reptiles. Reptiles have been a thing that I've enjoyed for a really long time, and you know, I obviously still enjoy them and continue to enjoy them and probably will for the rest of my life. Now, amphibians though, what about amphibians? So I have never really kept many amphibian species before. I've kept a few. The funny thing is though, I absolutely adore amphibians, and I would say I had a passion for amphibians way before I had a passion for reptiles. So now let's just like take a little look back on me as a like 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old. So I grew up in Nova Scotia, Canada, where there's not really many reptiles in the area. However, there are a decent number of amphibians. The only reptiles that we have in Nova Scotia are a couple snakes and a few turtles. There's no lizards or anything there. So as a child, I didn't really find many reptiles except for like the occasional snake. However, what I did find a lot of was frogs. Now, the species that I would catch as a child were probably things just like leopard frogs and northern green frogs and bullfrogs. I found so many of them as a child, and I also found lots of tadpoles. At a super young age, I was super fascinated in frogs. I did a ton of research about them. I knew a lot about frogs for like an 8-year-old. I was super passionate about them. Here is some photos of me as a child with frogs. As you guys can probably tell, I enjoyed finding frogs and stuff as a kid. I also really enjoyed finding salamanders. Now, fast forward to my pet keeping years. When I was like a young teenager, I don't know exactly how old, I was young, I got a green tree frog. So this is just an American green tree frog. So this would have been the first pet amphibian that I owned. And so I owned this green tree frog for quite a few years while I was in like school and stuff, and she did end up passing away in 2017. So this was like even before I had my YouTube channel and everything. So let's forward until now. So here I am. I love frogs, like I mentioned. So it had been my plan for a while now to get some species of frogs once I had the space and everything for them and the resources for them. I wasn't in any rush, but I knew that it was something I wanted to do eventually. So now over this quarantine, I had a lot of time to just work on my animals, get new enclosures, upgrades, and everything. And with that, that meant that I now had the ability to prepare for some frogs. So yeah, I'm not gonna ramble too much about that, so let's just fast forward until right now. So like I said, I've wanted frogs for a really long time, and back in June I finally got some. Now I do want to mention I do have a chubby frog named Sandwich. Don't worry, Sandwich has not been forgotten about. Sandwich is thriving and doing just fine, but we are just talking about some different amphibians today. So I knew that I'd wanted some species of tree frog for a while now, and I was prepared to get some. And then I happened to find some frogs for rehoming on Kijiji. Now, for those of you who don't know, Kijiji is basically just the Canadian Craigslist. I do want to say I did adopt 2 species of frogs. This video is mainly going to be only about one though, but I will briefly mention them. So back in June, I found a pair of Vietnamese mossy frogs for rehoming. And then back around July, I found a white tree frog for rehoming, also on Kijiji. So all 3 of my new frogs did come from rehoming situations, so I didn't buy them or anything. I just adopted them from people who needed to find new homes for them. All of them were well cared for or anything. It wasn't any sort of rescue situation. And funny enough, the 2 different people that I got these frogs from both actually happened to recognize me from YouTube. So if you're watching, hello, your frogs are doing great. With that said, today we are going to be focusing on my white tree frog. So now let's go ahead and meet Alfredo. This right here is Alfredo, my white tree frog. White tree frogs are also sometimes known as dumpy free frogs or Australian green tree frog. They have a couple different names, although I usually go with whites. No reason for that, that's just what I say. So Alfredo here is just starting to wake up, so it's just getting close to the time when the lights would turn off, and these guys are primarily nocturnal, So that is really when Alfredo starts waking up. So why don't we go ahead and grab my spray bottle and then give Alfredo's enclosure a nice little mist. The enclosure is now all nice and misted down. Normally when I mist the enclosure, Alfredo starts to wake up, and you can kind of see that right here. So Alfredo kind of woke up, moving around the leaf. Oh, we got a nice little jump there. So yeah, as you guys can probably see now, Alfredo is now entirely awake for the night. So the lights on Alfredo's enclosure are attached to a timer, so these will go off in about half an hour. So Alfredo here is a juvenile White's tree frog, so Alfredo is not full grown. So Alfredo currently lives in this 18 by 18 by 24 bioactive enclosure. So this here is an exoteric enclosure, so it is a front opening one, and as I mentioned, it is entirely bioactive. When I first got Alfredo, I originally just set up a tub like quarantine setup, so he was a little bit smaller than he is now when I first got him, so it was nice being able to monitor him in a more simple setup. But now that I'm confident that he's doing well, it's really nice to be able to upgrade him into this bioactive enclosure. So right now, most of the plant coverage on this enclosure is more towards the bottom half, but the main reason for this is just because I know that all of these plants will grow up relatively fast. I do have a lot of pothos in here, which are a very quick growing plant. The snake plant will also grow tall, and then I do have this monstera in here. This is my first time using this monstera in a terrarium, so I'm not super positive on how it's going to do, but I'm excited to find out. Hopefully it does well. But back to the frogs. So as of right now, Alfredo is the only frog living in this enclosure. As I mentioned, I did get Alfredo from a rehoming situation, and he was the only one being rehomed. Eventually, I would like to get Alfredo some more friends for this enclosure, and by friends, I just mean more frogs. Obviously, frogs don't really make friends the same way we do, but white tree frogs do tend to get along well in pairs or groups, so I would like to get maybe 1 or 2 more frogs for this enclosure. However, I'm in no rush. I'll probably just wait until I maybe find some more from rehoming, or possibly some from a good breeder. But yeah, like I was saying, no rush, but eventually I would like to get a couple more white tree frogs. So this enclosure right now is just misted down, so obviously it does look quite humid. However, it doesn't always look like this. I do personally only mist my white tree frog once a day. Alfredo's enclosure only gets misted about an hour before the lights go off at night, and then during the day I allow this enclosure to dry out. So where these guys are from, they are mainly found in Australia, but you can also find them in places like Indonesia. The days are usually quite dry and warm, and the nights get a lot more cool and humid, which is the main reason why these guys are nocturnal. During the day, when it's too hot and dry for them to be out, they find some nice cool dark hiding spots to hang out until the sun goes down and it gets cool enough for them to come out. Because that's what they experience in the wild, I don't let this enclosure stay humid all the time. I do like to give it a dry out period during the day and then more humid nights. Once Alfredo wakes up for the night, he is super active, which I think is super adorable. I am going to go ahead and feed Alfredo here soon. He is super fun to feed. He'll take right off tongue, so I'm excited to show you guys that. But before we do that, I do just want to kind of give you guys a look at his enclosure in a bit more detail. The background on this enclosure is one that I custom made, so I made it out of spray foam and then siliconed the dirt and cocoa fiber and stuff onto it. So this terrarium here does have this entire cork round siliconed into the back of the enclosure, or foamed into the back of the enclosure. So this provides Alfredo with a really good hiding spot if he wants it, so he can go right down in there and completely hide. Eventually I might even put some plants in there, who knows, but that's it for now. I also have these mushroom ledges in the enclosure, which I really like. Alfredo sometimes sits on them and I think it's super cute. Overall, I'm really happy with the way that this background turned out. I kind of built like a little ledge onto the background here, which is awesome. I love seeing him use it. Oh, and there he goes. He just jumped onto his mushroom ledge. There you go, Alfredo. Got a nice little resting spot. And then just throughout the enclosure here, I do have some branches. I think I would like to add a few more branches eventually. I think I'd like another thicker, tall one over here. And like I said too, the plants will eventually grow in a lot taller, providing a lot more coverage up here and more climbing opportunities. But for now, I do think it still provides him with a lot of different places to hide and explore, and he seems to really be enjoying it. As I briefly mentioned a minute ago, Alfredo is super fun to feed. He has a super high feeding response. It's super funny. Last time I fed him, I was tongue feeding him a super worm, and he just jumped right onto the tongs, didn't wait for the worm to like approach him or anything, just jumped right on the tongs. So I thought that it would be really fun to film feeding. Today I'm going to be feeding him some crickets. I'm going to attempt to tongue feed him. Normally when I feed crickets to my animals, I just let them loose in the enclosure. I really like letting my animals have the opportunity to hunt. I think it's really good enrichment and exercise for them. However, for the sake of this video, I think it'll be a lot more enjoyable if we see him tongue feeding, and then maybe I'll also let a few go in his enclosure, who knows. Anyways, let's just go ahead and grab some crickets and start feeding Alfredo. I told you guys, Alfredo is so fun to tongue feed. It's so fun just like watching him jump onto them. I don't know, animals who are fun to feed are just like genuinely some of the most interesting animals to keep. So yeah, I really do enjoy having Alfredo, and I'm super happy that I was able to welcome him into my home. And there we go, a video about amphibians, the first one in a really long time, but hopefully the first of many. As I mentioned before, Alfredo isn't the only frog that I got this summer. I also got 2 Vietnamese mossy frogs. These guys I will do a whole separate video about, so if you are interested in seeing more of Alfredo or also learning about my mossy frogs in the future, please make sure that you are subscribed to my channel. It would mean a ton to me, and also turn on notifications if you haven't, because YouTube sucks. With all of that said, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I am going to go ahead and end the video here. Before we do that, like I said, it would mean a lot to me if you gave this video a big thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel. It would also mean a lot to me if you would check out my social media. It will all be down in the description below, so please feel free to do that. I'd love to have you guys there. With all of that said, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you all next time.